Hey again, everyone. Welcome in on a Wednesday night to talk college football with the voice of college football. And as college football fans, what do we love to do? Well, we love to watch the games and root and cheer and scream our heads off and either celebrate all night because our team pulled through for us or sulk and get mad and wait till next week. And then what do? We like to argue. So tonight we are going to look at the top 10 arguments in college football history as submitted by CFB 150. So ESPN's CFB 150 listing as college football hit its 150th season. That was 2 years ago, as the sport was officially or unofficially dawned in 1869. So the 2019 season was season number 150, and ESPN in particular and many other sites and platforms celebrated college football 150 with a number of lists and greatest of and most watched and most this and most that, and the top 10 arguments in college football history was part of all of that. So welcome in. We're going to talk that, but ultimately we talk about whatever you'd like to talk about concerning the game we all love, college football. So that's why I'm here, to talk up the game we all love. Just recorded a segment with Blaine Gilmer from Recruiting Every Second. That will be on his the Rivals Georgia platform and also on our SEC channel. So keep in mind, regardless of who you root for, most likely we've got a channel for you. We've got an SEC channel. We've got 7 of the teams in the SEC covered: Alabama, Auburn, Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. We've got Florida State covered, as well as North Carolina, Miami, and Clemson in the ACC, Oklahoma and Texas out of the Big 12, Oregon and USC in the Pac-12, Notre Dame, and then out of the Big 10, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Wisconsin. So pick out your favorite team, or if you just want to support us, you just want to support what we're building here. And as Ronan likes to latch on to, something that I've been stating for a long time, catch the vision. If you want to help us catch the vision and ride this thing to the heights that we would like to take it to and need to take it to keep going, then please subscribe to any channel that is under 1,000 subscribers to get us to 1,000 subscribers on all these channels. And then you know what? You can drop off. After we clear 1,000 by 100 or 200, then you can let it go. All right. Good to see everybody here. Let me get through the live chat before we address the top 10 arguments in college football history. But again, you guys ultimately produce the show, so I'll take calls concerning anything on your mind tonight. And of course, shop Amazon using the link in the description section of any of the videos. You will not find that link in this particular video right now because it's got to be added after the video stream is done. But go to any video and grab the Amazon link at the top of the description section. And please put it somewhere where you'll find it when you're doing your Amazon shopping. It's the same shopping experience. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it helps us build the channel if you use the link. All right. You can reach me at 860-499-3332. I will post that number on the ticker in just a minute after I've ingrained and fully emphasized that you shop Amazon. And please do so using the link in the description section. Keep in mind, we're on Patreon. It costs you 15 cents a day. I'm sorry. That would be a lie. I think it's I did the calculation at one point, 17 cents per day on Patreon, exclusive live streams per request. So I'm reminding our patrons over on Patreon, if you haven't seen any exclusive live streams for a while, it's because there's one per week per request. You got to request them. One exclusive live stream per week per request over on Patreon, as well as watch parties. My predictions, that's worth 17 cents a day right there. And of course, Insider information from our guy, Steve Merrill at Pro Sports Info and Wager Talk. Also, you can contribute to the Voice of College Football at PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo. To bypass YouTube, just go to Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal and just search Mark Rogers TV. All right, here we go. And if nobody noticed, I'm on time tonight. Talk is Pitt. Good to see you. I will be reviewing the Panthers soon. Over the next several weeks, we'll be doing roster breakdowns of some of the top teams in the nation. I looked back at last June thinking, okay, what was successful that we posted last June? And I was I got to admit, a little bit blown away. We had Georgia, Ohio State, Nebraska, Florida State, Michigan, and a number of other team roster breakdowns. And those routinely did more than 15,000 views. Please check out the video that we posted this morning looking at recruiting rankings over the last 10 years in the SEC versus the results on the field. Who overachieved, who underachieved, and do the recruiting rankings mean much of anything? All right, let's get to the phone lines. On with the Voice of College Football. Who do we have?
Hey, Mark, it's George. How you doing?
Hey, George. I'm good. How are you?
I just wanted to kick the show off with a bang and show everybody how to call in. There's that number, Mark Rogers call-in number.
I don't have it up yet.
Hey, Mark.
So blame me.
Okay. Well,
I'm still telling people down on the ticker below to shop on Amazon using the link that I provide. I'm trying to hammer that home.
Mark, Mark, this is pretty simple, okay? When I first met you, you had like 3,000 followers or 5,000, or I don't even, I think we made 5,000 together. You have like 25,000 now, right?
Yes. On this channel.
So if
there's
all
about
those
55,000
people, if all those people never did anything else for you, if they never hit the like button, if they never shared a video, anything, if they just use your portal for Amazon, it would work out good. 25,000 people. Even if you only use Amazon once a year, if you just use that goddamn portal, that portal, because then you get like 8 cents out of every 1,000 they spend it, and it adds up times a million people, I don't know what the exact breakdown is. That's beside the point. But it's worth it. It adds up. They
actually provide a little bit better than that. Yeah, I think it's somewhere, depending on the product you buy,
right,
it's like 3 to 8%. It's pretty good.
Hey. Right.
You there, George?
Yeah, some old farmer friend of mine. I know an old farmer rancher in Eastern Oregon. He just called me, and I sent him a text that said, "I'll call you back."
Okay, good to know.
He likes me.
Do you need to go, George?
No. He had a court case once, and this dude is incredible. He was at a family picnic one time, and the police came and arrested his kid for like a failure to appear on a traffic ticket at the family picnic. And he's a rancher. And he got mad and he went home and studied and studied. It's like 50 years later. He's like the best lawyer in the United States of America. You call him for anything. But I'm an outlier. Every once in a while, he calls me up and he says, "George, I have a runaway train. I don't know what to do. Do you have any suggestions?" And that's like, that's what I do for a living, Mark. When people have a runaway case, a federal case, and they don't know what to do, I go, "Do this, do that," And that's slick. You can't invent that job. It happened by accident because I like to read books. And nobody reads books anymore. It's over. I win. I'm the only one that ever read the freaking books. There's a thing called the Uniform Commercial Code. There's so many treaties between countries. There's copyrights. At the terms and conditions, right? Nobody's ever read any of this stuff. I like to read. I read, and look up the words, the definitions.
Sure. And the connection between your rancher buddy
it's some crazy shit.
Or whatever you've moved on to now in college football is?
Yes, I've retired now, and I sit around and make jokes. I was live with Pete a couple of years ago. 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's live called in StreamYard. For the first time, I found how to go live. Have you seen that on video? It's so hilarious. It's enough to ruin my reputation.
I was not blessed enough to come across that. No.
It's funny. It'll make you laugh. It was 2 weeks ago. It's StreamYard with Pete on Saturday. He doesn't usually do Saturdays, but he did a StreamYard. And Mark, it's so funny. If you were there on the show and you listened from the beginning, the whole time in the chat, I'm trying to get in. I'm trying to figure it out. It took me an hour to figure out StreamYard, and bam, there I was live on camera. And no one else went live on camera except Pete for 1 second. It was just me. And I was just making jokes about aliens and Area 51 and Mark Zuckerberg.
I will not be making that mistake on my show. We'll keep you on the phone.
You might
keeping George on the phone.
You only have to go viral one time, Mark. That's $250,000 in your pocket.
Well,
get 1 million views for 5 days in a row. It's $250,000.
This is true. Since I've got a monetized channel, all we need to do is have something crazy happen one time. That would be great.
Nobody on earth will tell you how it works. I've only seen one person ever tell the truth. And he said, I had a video go viral. I know where that video is. I sent it to you when it happened because we were all trying to figure out how does this really work. And he showed us. He showed his pages. He took screenshots and showed us the screenshots of his algorithms with YouTube. If 5 days in a row, he made a cool $250,000. And the thing is still going viral. He's made millions off that one video. And he's a financial advisor.
In the meantime, George, believe it or not, we're going to stay with college football. So I'm going to move on to our next caller, who I believe is calling about college football.
I was just trying to get the show rolling. Anything I had to say would be the Gators are winning it all this year, going 15-0. You know that.
I know it, George. We appreciate you calling to get the show rolling with your rancher story.
Right. And tell the Georgia fans I love them. I feel sorry for them. I know it's not their fault.
You just did.
Sucks.
Thanks, George.
And Kirby. All right. Bye.
Doesn't everybody now feel like the show is rolling, that got it started? All right. Got David Greenshield on the line to talk some college football, or maybe talking about his neighbor, the rancher. I don't know. David, what do you got for us tonight?
I hate to disappoint you, Mark Rogers, but I don't have a rancher as a neighbor. He can sometimes be a pain in the ass, but other than that, that's all I got on my neighbor. I'm going to try and steer the conversation back to college football, if you don't mind, Mark.
Please do.
Okay. One of the things we didn't talk about, and I actually got a chance to talk about with Uncle Lou a couple weeks ago, and this is kind of lost amid, the expansion of the playoff. But Mark, aren't we just continuing to look at more and more the bowl games being diminished here as we expand to a 12-team playoff or even more?
Absolutely. Because right now we've got the 14 playoff, and we know how much the bowls have been diminished already. Not even just by the players who opt out, but just I feel it. I don't have anything. I can't necessarily quantify it. I would have to go to the TV ratings to try to quantify it. But I think that the TV ratings would bear it out. But I just think from the general apathy of the fans, we don't get excited for the bowl games the way we used to when they seem to be part of the entire fabric of the postseason. Now the postseason is this playoff, and that's what everybody's waiting for. And the bowl games are just a time killer. But now we're going to go to this 12-team playoff, which involves, I haven't done the math, but how many games is that going to be? Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be like 10 or 12 games. And these bowl games, even if they get incorporated, see if you follow my logic, or it's more opinion here, just kind of the way I view college football, is that even though some of these bowl games are going to be integrated into the playoff, I no longer really consider them bowl games at that point. They're playoff
I
games.
agree.
Like when the Rose
Right.
Bowl is integrated into the playoff and it doesn't involve the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, is it really the Rose Bowl?
Right.
When it's
Well,
Florida
you know, what if-
State, if Florida State and Auburn are playing in the Rose Bowl and just happens to be Oklahoma and Georgia, there we go. We'll go with a real life example, 2017. Oklahoma and Georgia are playing in the Rose Bowl. That to me is not the Rose Bowl. It's a national semifinal playoff game. It's not the Rose Bowl. It's not Ohio State and USC. It's not the Big Ten and the Pac-12.
Right.
It's a playoff game. And then to butcher it even further, of course, David, last year, because of COVID, the Rose Bowl wasn't even played at the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl was a playoff game in Dallas, Texas. No, was that the Rose
Right.
Bowl?
No. It was a joke. I mean, I get more and more, Mark, that you're much more of a traditionalist from what you had illustrated, which I can certainly appreciate. I mean, I think there's a few things at play here, Mark. You know, number one, you have the BCS, then you have the playoff, and now the playoffs. I mean, the BCS was. I mean, the bowls were still good during the BCS. Like I think the viewership during you look at bowl games viewership probably during the BCS era, you know, the ratings were still probably pretty good, you know. But then you get to a playoff, you're going to minimize it even more. Now you get to an expansion of a playoff, you're going to minimize it even more. I mean, and even major bowl games, nobody will watch Rose, Orange, Sugar, you know, the major bowl games that we know about, everybody knows about. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't want to say we're going to see elimination of the bowl games, but I mean, what direction are you going to see as far as just less and less of them, Mark? Do you have kind of a view on that, especially once we get to 12 team, on what direction that could go?
Well, I think they're going to continue to go into the direction of integrating the bowl games into the playoffs. So now we have the New Year's Six and then the playoff games, which are bowl games. What do they use? The rose, the sugar, the cotton, the orange, the peach, correct?
Right.
And rotate those.
Right.
But again, to me, every bowl game. Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just going to say Fiesta, I think, too, Mark. I don't know if you mentioned that.
Yeah, so to me, all the bowl games, especially the ones that obviously have a legacy, a tradition, have a flavor to them. And when you take away the components that give them that flavor, then they're just sterile games placed within playoff, and that's fine. But please don't call the Holiday Bowl when it's a first round playoff game and it's going to be played somewhere on campus somewhere, or even if it is still played at the Holiday Bowl in San Diego. I just, if I brought to mind and I listed off bowl games, specific bowl games, it would bring to mind for you and other college football fans who love the sport, it would conjure up images and memories and visions and a certain flavor. The Citrus Bowl has had a contract between the Big Ten and the SEC for something like 30 years. So we have gotten used to, you know, a third or fourth place team in the Big Ten playing a third or fourth place team in the SEC, and it's played at the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, and there's a certain the Gator Bowl is a Southern feel to it. It's usually an ACC team, and it's had different contract variations, but it's always been an ACC event. And I just think all those bowl games lose that when they lose their conference affiliations, and then they become this sterile playoff game.
I tend to agree. I mean, I would say this. I'm kind of like you, Mark. I'm a college football junkie. I was talking about this with Lou. I love all levels of football, high school, college, pros. If there was a flag football game down the road, I'd probably go watch that. But, I mean, I'm just an all-around football fan myself, every level. That being said, I mean, I really enjoy the college bowl games. A lot of times that's for financial reasons. Although I think that's why a lot of people enjoy football games. It's a big part of the popularity, I'm sure, as you know. But, I mean, where are we at right now, Mark? Is it 50, 60 bowl games a year, something like that?
No, it's 40, 41.
Oh, 40, I'm sorry. Okay. I thought we were closer to 50. I'm sorry. So Lou had thrown this out here as an idea, and let me put this out here to you. And I don't know if you've already proposed this. He thinks, and I totally agree with him, and I'm somewhere between 7-5 and 8-4. I think it's a flat-out joke that you can go 6-6 and get to a bowl game. Are you in agreement on that, Mark?
I don't think it's a flat-out joke. We've now stumbled to the 5-7 range. Those teams, depending on their academic standing, because it's good that you brought up the number of bowl games, because the mathematician geniuses who thought this through, and I'm being sarcastic, once we got to a certain number of bowl games, it became mathematically impossible to have teams with 500 records fill all those slots. When you have 41 bowl games and you have 130 teams in FBS and you're awarding 82 bowl slots, well, that's more than half than 130. So you are going to have to invite 5 and 7 teams to go to bowl games. So that's even worse than what you're talking about. We have had, over the last 5 or 6 years, had to invite teams with 5 wins and 7 losses to go to bowl games. 6-6, I am not that fervently against it, but I get your point and Uncle Lou's point. And I can get on board with that to say at least have a winning record. I can get on board with that and say go 7-5 to reach a bowl game.
Right. I'm between 7-5 and 8-4. Lou is at 8-4, which either number you go with, I think we're going to significantly reduce. We're going to put a dent in those bowl games and have even less, which I don't think would be the worst thing. I still think having a winning record should at least be a requirement. And 7-5 is not. I mean, for some schools, that's asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars. But I don't think that's asking too much. Just in my own personal view on that. But I could go either way, 7-5 or 8-4, Mark.
Well, going all the way back to our origin, Dave, real quick, as college football fans, 6-5 when they played an 11-game season was the standard.
Right.
Not what was interesting then was there weren't enough bowl games. It was the exact opposite issue. There weren't enough bowl games to award all those 6-5 teams with bowl slots. So that didn't guarantee that you would make a bowl game. That only made you eligible for a bowl game. As recent as 1997, I was covering the SEC and most specifically Mississippi State, those teams. And Mississippi State went 7-4 in 1997, and they did not get a bowl invitation.
Right. Well, I mean, what always confounded me, Mark, I guess because they wouldn't have had a coach. Ohio State was eligible for a bowl game in 1987.
Yes.
And didn't go. I don't know if that's because Coach Bruce had left. But
yeah, they were offered the Sun Bowl spot against West Virginia.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's crazy. They played West Virginia earlier that year, I think, didn't they, Mark?
87. You might be right. Why would they have played them again? Was that correct? 87? I guess so. I was thinking they played Oregon in 87. I think you're right. West Virginia. I think they beat them 24-3 comes to mind. I'll have to look that up.
Right. Yeah, because I remember, too, the non-conference games, that and the 13-13 tie, I believe, at Baton Rouge.
Yes.
Right. Want to get to the question part of it. I just got, I could think of a few more, but I'm going to ask you, let me just throw 2 at you. All right. And this is just a question because it's widely been perceived, and I'm dying to know your answer on what you think the greatest is because you've watched more college football than me. Bottom line, Mark, a lot of people say Texas versus USC in that Rose Bowl is the greatest college football game of all time. Do you agree? And if not, what game would you put ahead of it?
Wow. Oh, boy. All right.
I've been dying to answer that question for
Okay.
a long time, Mark.
There's a lot of aspects to consider here. Number one, I'm going to say that the importance of the game has to factor in. Because if we're just talking about the most exciting, best played games, you could grab a game from week 5 in 1993 that was 49-48, but it didn't mean a whole lot. So there is a component that says the importance of the game has something to do with the greatest, it being the greatest game. Correct? It has to be an important game.
Yes. Sure.
I thought that was a great game. Of course it was a great game. Was it the greatest game of all time? And as an Ohio State fan, I've got to try to take my fandom out of it and not select the 03 Fiesta Bowl.
Yes, that would be up there for me. I mean, it's still up there. Yeah.
USC did have a 2-score lead with about 6 minutes left, 7 minutes left, which was not insurmountable, of course. We see it surpassed all the time, but it was even more insurmountable then, being as good as they were, plus 2 scores in 5 or 6 minutes was pretty difficult. So it looked like they had it close to being salted away. And you had that 4th down Lendale White play where he was stopped. Otherwise, if USC gains the 1st down on 4th and inches, then the game's over. And Vince Young, of course, becomes a legend. And it's an upset that kind of adds to the flavor of the game anytime there's an upset, as it being a great game. Man, I'm going to say for right now, I'm going to agree with you or whomever. That typically does get placed at the top of the heap. I got to think that there's a better game out there, but I'm just not coming up with it that also has the importance of that game.
Right. Well, I mean, for an Ohio State fan, there's always 3 games. The greatest victory of the Meyer era, which is the victory over Alabama in 14 in the Sugar Bowl. The greatest victory of the Tressel era, which is the victory over Miami, and still it's the greatest game. And I must say, one that's always forgotten, the greatest victory of the Cooper era, which was beating Jake the Snake in Arizona State in that Rose Bowl.
Sure.
Which was a game with a lot of meaning, too, and helped decide a national championship. Ask Steve Spurrier.
Yeah, the other component to great games is the game being decided at the end. Because I thought, as soon as you mentioned Ohio State and Alabama was throwing the ball into the end zone, but they didn't have a legitimate shot to win the game. They had a prayer.
Yeah.
So it didn't come down to where they were at the 12-yard line. But if you would strip away the titles of the games, meaning BCS championship game versus SEC championship game, take that 2012 Alabama-Georgia game.
Oh, good one. Good one.
That was a phenomenal game.
Yeah, Uncle Lou would not want to chime in on that. In my opinion, I think that was the national championship game that year, because I still believe Georgia would have smoked Notre Dame on a neutral field the same way Alabama did. So, bottom line, I must say, and Uncle Lou's going to say this too, is Georgia lost 2 national championships in Atlanta to Alabama, 12 and 17.
Yeah, so I'm going to be the contrarian, and I'm going to say that the SEC championship game in 2012, until I think of another one, is my greatest game of all time. And nobody's going to agree with me because it's not a national championship game. People gravitate to that.
Sure.
The Florida State Auburn game doesn't get enough play. The 2013 game, that was a touchdown pass with 10 seconds left that culminated a 21-3 comeback.
Mark, a game that gets talked about, Notre Dame people would, the Catholics versus convicts. Miami people do too.
Yeah, 31-30. That had 2 controversial plays. One was a Miami fumble that was awarded to Notre Dame inside the 5-yard line, and the other was the one of Miami's touchdowns, I didn't know it at the time. I don't think I realized this until the 30 at 30 documentary, was that the Miami player did not catch the football for a touchdown. He dropped the ball and he was just kind of lost in a mass of reporters and sideline photographers, and they gave him a touchdown. He didn't catch the ball. But yeah, 31-30, Notre Dame, Miami. Yeah, that was absolutely.
And that effectively decided the national championship that year because, Notre Dame kind of ran through the rest of their schedule.
Oh, sure. That was the game of the year for sure.
Yep.
It didn't have much scoring, but I'm going to go back to right at the time, David, I'm sorry to cut you off, at the time that you became a college football fan, I believe, based on our conversations. And again, this isn't going to resonate with a lot of people that want to see 45-42 games, but Penn State intercepting Vinny Testaverde 5 times and pulling off a major upset in the Fiesta Bowl to beat Miami. And Miami hit the ball inside the 15-yard line at the end of the game to try to pull it out, and Vinny was picked off again, and Penn State pulled off the upset. And again, not a pretty game. I bet they completed a la Craig Krenzel, 7 for 21. Penn State completed like 5 passes in that game and won 14-10 over Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, really, Miami lost a couple national titles to us in Penn State that were basically decided on turnovers. That they lost the turnover battle badly against us, and that was they'll talk about the call for forever, but Miami fans need to understand turning the ball over 5 times wasn't a good idea. I will say this, Mark. I just wanted to get to a couple other things real quick. On the, is it a foregone conclusion? I was once told this. Had Herschel Walker come back for his senior year, do you believe he would have won the Heisman again?
1983, Mike Rozier won it. Nebraska was undefeated. Georgia regressed that year from what was a top 5 team the previous 3 years. He would have. What I enjoy and think is beneficial for the sport is the Heisman Trophy, and its voting is much more open today than it used to be. Back then, the preseason favorite, if there was a clear preseason favorite, that individual had a substantial advantage. Like, they had to be knocked off that spot. And to your point, Herschel Walker was that guy after winning the Heisman in 82. So if he would have turned in 1,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, which certainly is nothing to scoff at, but if he would have been, for him, a pedestrian type of season, that would have won the Heisman most likely. Yeah.
Right. Still believe Keith Byers should have won the Heisman, but Doug Flutie threw the most famous pass in the history of college football. So,
while we're running down great plays and great games, that one for me is on the flip side of history. It is the most overrated play in the history of college football. Along with Jadeveon Clowney's hit on, who was it? Fitz Toussaint? I don't think it was Toussaint. Whoever it was, the Michigan running back in the Outback Bowl. Jadeveon Clowney wasn't blocked. Anyway, I know it was a devastating hit, but Jadeveon Clowney, the blocker, the blocking scheme messed up, and he just ran at the running back. Like, he didn't make a great play to get to the running back, number one. Number two, the Flutie play. David, how many Hail Marys do we see in college football from week to week? There's usually maybe, I'm not going to say one every week, but at least one every other week. There might be more than that. 6 or 8 during the college football season that win games. So we've got this happening on a fairly regular basis. Number one. Number two, that game meant nothing.
No, it was a meaningless game. You're right. Yeah, I'll say this, Mark. To this day, the Stewart Hail Mary was far more impressive. That was 70 yards in the air.
Yes. Yeah. In terms of throwing a pass. Yes. I don't understand. Again, it's got this mystic quality, the Flutie play. But if you ask most college football fans, they would make more of a big deal out of it than they truly realized that it wasn't. Or maybe it was because it won him the Heisman.
Yeah, unfortunately, cost Keith Byers. But well, as always, a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers. You take care of yourself.
Thank you, David. And for the record, we were both correct on 1987. You were correct on the West Virginia game to open the season. I was correct on the score, 24-3.
Good call.
Thank you,
Take
David.
care.
Appreciate it. Our guy, David Greenshield, calling about greatest games in college football. Guess I'll have to work on that list. I was stumped. I couldn't really come up with anything. I guess I hate to make the call like everybody else. It seems like Texas, USC is named by most. And if that's what it is, I think you folks have gotten used to me just laying out my opinion, which means that I don't lay out an opinion just to get clicks and shock people and be a jerk. Like, I don't just throw things out there to be shocking. But then on the other side, I don't have an opinion that's safe. I don't just play the safe opinion route just to play it safe. I just give it to you authentically. And so sometimes it's mundane and boring. Well, that's my opinion. Well, that's what everybody else thinks. Well, there's a reason everybody else thinks that. It's the obvious truth or fact. And then other times I'll come up with something that nobody else is necessarily touting as being the best or the worst or the way it should be. But I will, at some point, when I get done taking these calls, we will go through the top 10 arguments in college football. And we will run through those, and I'll give you my take on each one of those. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Senator Thrawn. How are you?
Hey, man. How's it going?
All right, man.
Good to hear from you.
I was just there, and you got. I'm sorry, say that again.
Good to hear from you. What's going on?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Did you have a good Father's Day weekend?
I did. I spent time with my daughter during the afternoon and then with my son that night.
Very good, very good. I had my daughter all weekend. She's 14, and we watched some things Friday night, and we went to a movie Saturday, and then Sunday, Father's Day, we did about as good as you can do, go to a ball game. We went to a Ranger game.
Very cool.
And for Ranger fans, this is usually start of used to always do the brutal 100-degree games, but they built a brand new stadium, so it was a cool 75 and 100 degrees outside. But that was very nice. I know the players and the fans will. And I think that maybe could help the Rangers a little. I think sometimes they have a hard time getting people who want to come play there because it's so brutal. But now that's not an issue, so maybe that'll help them. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a beautiful stadium. It's beautiful. So we had a good time. So I was listening to the best games. One game that doesn't get talked about to me is amazing was the Nebraska-Miami, the Schnellenberger game.
You don't think that gets talked about?
I mean, I don't know if it doesn't seem like it ever gets mentioned to be one of the greatest, of all time. I mean, it's definitely talked about, but I don't ever hear that one about one of the greatest. And I think it was just kind of a bold call for Osborne to not go for one, because he would have been voted number one if he doesn't go for two. Because they were undefeated. They were the only undefeated team. And I think had they tied, I'm pretty sure they would have been voted number one.
Yes, absolutely. They would have been number one. Yeah, they were the only undefeated team in college football. They had dominated the sport the whole season. They were consensus number one, and the tie would not have hurt them from that standpoint. And it was also odd because Tom Osborne was viewed as a conservative coach who would do what the textbook told you to do. And so for him to go for 2, I just think he had a level of confidence that they were going to do it, and he wanted to decidedly win a national championship.
Right. It was his first, and I just I just think he wanted to win it and and not just kind of get it in a tie. But that's definitely, I mean, unless there's a screw up on the snap in the hold or something, that's a national title Nebraska definitely should have had. And Miami was really good, but they were, they had lost the game early, I think. Like Florida, like the first game of the year.
Yes.
That was kind of the first year I got into college football. I was like 7 or 8, and I kind of remember that season. I don't remember a whole lot, but I think that's the first time I went to an OU game. I think it was OU Nebraska, 83, because we didn't move to Oklahoma City till 84. We lived about 4 hours away from Norman, eastern Oklahoma. My parents would go to every home game, but I was pretty little. I stayed with my parents usually, but so that was kind of the first season. But I remember, I think Miami lost to Florida, and I just remember they had the guy look like Captain Kangaroo on the sideline. I just remember that as a kid. And then they end up, and I remember Bernie, because Bernie's throwing motion is so weird.
Mm-hmm.
You think Bernie Kosar, for as good a quarterback is, his throwing motion is just bizarre.
His throwing motion, and he was very awkward, and he was not fleet of foot. What was strange about Bernie Kosar too, if you watched him, the way he positioned his feet when he took the snap is he cheated. He wasn't square to the line of scrimmage. He had his right foot back, so he could backpedal.
So everybody knew he was going to pass it. I mean, and he still made plays, and he was so unathletic, and he'd kind of point to where he should have thrown. It's so weird, but he was really good for about 6 or 7 years there with the Browns.
Sure, he was.
He was one of the first guys to kind of go pro early. I think he went like after his sophomore year or something.
Yeah, he only played 2 years at Miami, the 83 and 84 seasons. And he graduated early and went in the supplemental draft. That's when a lot of people found out what the supplemental draft was.
Yeah, that's what Bosworth did. I remember he was another one that did supplemental. But yeah, Bernie was kind of the first one. And how was he able to? That's why he could do it, because it was supplemental. That's why he was allowed to do it.
Yeah, he had graduated from
I thought you had
school.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I didn't really know much about mine because, of course, learned after that. I mean, after that game, and then they just became so good, and they were our nemesis. Switzer could never beat them. He beat Jimmy every time at OSU, but Jimmy got him at Miami every time.
Yep.
I actually recently watched on they have a lot of these replay of these games on YouTube, and I watched that. You guys were talking about the 86 year. It was the OU Miami 86 game when 1-2 and down in the Orange Bowl.
I remember it well. Was that the 20-14 game?
No, that was the Orange Bowl championship. I went to that. No, it was the regular season one at
the one in Norman. 27-14, I believe.
No, I was at the one in Norman, and that's the famous one in '85, because that's when Aikman broke his leg.
Yep.
That was that game, and I was at that game, and we all call it the lucky break, because OU was not really. We were trying to pass it, and we would not have won the national championship if Aikman stays quarterback. We might have gone 9-3 or something, because we just weren't. We didn't have the right linemen. We had so many great running backs. We didn't have that many great receivers. I mean, Keith Jackson, and Aikman, they were trying to somewhat of a pro, somewhat. I mean, he just didn't fit. And when he broke his leg, I mean, Barry just went back to let's go run the wishbone with Jamel Holloway. He ran the table and beat Penn State in the Orange Bowl. But so that was that year, and had Tennessee. If Miami beat Tennessee in the Sugar Bowl, they would have won it because they beat us, but they lost. I always kind of cheer for Tennessee because there's no way we win the championship. Because if Miami had beat Tennessee, they would have been 1 and we'd have been 2. But they lost, so we beat number 1 Penn State. And then the next year we went down to Miami, and Benny and Michael, the second half they just killed us. And then that was the year you talk about how I remember watching that Penn State game. That's where he kept throwing interception after interception. And the Fiesta Bowl, that was kind of the first. Because the Fiesta Bowl before that was kind of just a second-rate bowl. It wasn't that big a bowl. But then they got that Miami Penn State game that kind of made the Fiesta Bowl a big bowl because they got that 1 versus 2. Because they didn't have any tie-ins or anything.
Absolutely. Yep. All right, man. Anything else?
How do you think this thing that starts in July? I think you think like these kids are going to make a lot of money. I mean, they estimate Rattler. They project you can make $700,000-$800,000 with this because of social media and everything.
Sure. Well, may actually turn out to be a good thing if it's regulated correctly and monitored correctly. I think there's a lot of aspects to it that nobody can foresee, and a lot of things are going to surprise some people, if you follow me. So there's going to be a lot of rules and procedures set up, but then things are going to come up that nobody thought of. That's going to make it a bit of a slippery slope, but it may keep some of these players in the college game longer, maybe. I know they can make a lot more than that at the NFL level, but it might keep them around. If they really like playing college football and they can make $500,000, then maybe they will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It'll be right to see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, and there'll be a lot of you don't have to even be that famous. You're just an Oklahoma player or a Texas player, and you're known around Austin and Norman. You can do local stuff and make, 50, 60 grand, which that makes it where you can live. You're not struggling as with just the barely they give you as an athlete. I mean, just kind of local guys, I think, can do pretty well. Do car dealerships and restaurants and things and make 40, 50 grand just being an OU running back or something. So I think overall it'll be pretty nice to see how it plays out. But, all right, man. Well, it was good talking to you, my friend.
All right, Sooner Thrawn. Appreciate that, man. You have a good night.
All right, well, have a good night.
All right, let's move it along. Let's see who we've got on the line here at the Voice of College Football.
Hey, McD Sport. How are you doing?
McD, what's going on?
Good. I want to talk about 2 things. One being the college football playoff expansion. I think it's more good than bad, personally, but I do want to see a few things change with it. I think that every conference, including the SEC and ACC, I believe should be going to 9 conference games. And I think they should get rid of divisions if we do this expansion, because let's say you have undefeated Clemson, but if they get upset in the ACC championship game by 8-4, I don't know, Pitt, 8-4 Pitt. So I think you should get rid of conference divisions.
So you don't want divisions. You want 1 and 2 to play, like in the Big 12.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have no issue either way. If you play in a division, you win the division. I have no issue with that team advancing to the conference championship game. And even if they are 8-4 and they're taking on 11-1 and they win it, well, those are the rules, and I'm okay with that. I understand the criticism of it. I get it. I understand it. I validate it. I do get that perspective that 8-4 team shouldn't be able to win the championship all in one game versus having played not nearly as good a season as the team that they were playing. But the same could be said during the playoff. We can have a 13-0 team in the playoff, and we can have a 9-4 team in the playoff now with 12 teams, and the 9-4 team could win the college football championship. The same thing could be said. Well, did they belong there? But I hear you on the no divisions. Sure. I'd be fine with that.
The other thing I want to talk about is the Maryland Terps.
And Mike Locksley.
Absolutely, I want to talk about Mike Locksley. I want to talk about him and his coaching ratings not being a top 50 Power 5 coach.
Okay, before you continue, McD, I was on Michigan podcast this week. He has me on.
I saw
typically.
it.
Okay. So those were his rankings. Somebody bashed me for one of the rankings, and I reminded this person. I said those weren't my rankings. I was just responding to his rankings. But Mike Locksley was way down there.
Yeah, his rankings also I disagree with. And he said, and speaking about Michigan podcast, his rankings, he says he looks at perception. I think Maryland's looking nowhere but up. I think at worst we go 5-7 this year, and I think we make a bowl game this year. I look at Mike Locksley. I saw a lot of improvement from year 1 to year 2.
Okay, but you're talking about what you expect. He's ranking teams based on ranking coaches based on what they've accomplished. And to date, Mike Locksley has accomplished nothing but gotten his brains beat out with a pretty decent roster. And had a deplorable record with New Mexico State. So I get that you're optimistic, and I think there's reason for optimism. I think your roster is pretty good. You've got DJ Durkin collectively recruited a lot of speed for one thing. And so, Mike Locksley needs to do something with that team.
Well, a few things. One, it was New Mexico Mike Locksley coached for. It wasn't New Mexico State. It was New Mexico.
Yeah, I kind of mixed them up. Whoever, New Mexico. One of them's the Aggies and one of them's the Lobos. And I know for anybody who went to school there, or a fan of either team, I know they're completely different schools, different teams, the whole deal. But yeah, I will forever just mix them up.
But I do want to defend Mike Locksley that there was progress from year 1 to year 2. Year 1, he got blown out by Minnesota and Penn State, especially Penn State, that horrible 59-0 loss in year 1. Year 2, back and forth game of Minnesota, he went 45-44.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to Penn State. This is what I don't understand. I see some of these people predicting Penn State's football prediction already, and the game's in College Park, and they just think Penn State's going to walk in there and beat Maryland by 3 touchdowns or so. Did they watch last year and saw what happened up in Happy Valley?
I'm still expecting. I understand. I'm still expecting Penn State to win that game.
I think it's be favored. I think Penn State should be favored. But I'm just saying that's not going to be. There's no way you could call that a give me for Penn State.
Oh, I don't think it is. No, I would not be shocked if Maryland won at home against Penn State.
And I mean, I'm seeing. I think they can't get any worse defensively than what they were in year 1 on Locksley. I saw improvements defensively, believe it or not, even though it was kind of tough to watch. But I mean, they played really tough defensively against Penn State. They played pretty good defensively, I would say, against Indiana, a team that, in my opinion, Mark, I don't think Indiana is a top 25 team. I think they're going to regress big time. You know how you talk about every team, or I think the percentage is like 32% of teams decrease or increase a win total by 3. Indiana was a 9-10 win team in 2020 because of a weak Big Ten East. I think they decreased that win total. And I think they went 5-1 in the regular season. I think 5-2 in the bowl game. I think they only go 6-6 this upcoming season, or 7-5.
They've got to play Cincinnati out of conference.
Well, I'll tell you why. I think that Michigan and Penn State bounce back, and I think that Penn State game, it's in the Michigan game. They're both on the road. I think they drop both of those. My Terps are right there with Indiana. You remember? I remember you talking about. You said Maryland drove the ball right down their throats twice and couldn't cash it in, and they turned it over twice in that game against Indiana. And it's been the same thing for the previous 3 years. The year before Loxley's got there, Maryland's right there of Indiana. It's just because it comes down to offensive execution. So I'm not really high. I think Maryland. The game is in College Park. I think Maryland beats Indiana this year. I think we finally get that monkey off their back. I think they'll beat Rutgers. I think they'll beat Michigan State. I don't know necessarily who to get out of the West. They probably lose to Cincinnati, in my opinion. Matter of fact, I do have them losing to Cincinnati. And then the Ohio State game. Some people are picking that as an upset. I think Ohio State goes in there and beats them by 2-3 touchdowns.
Okay.
I think Indiana just took advantage of a weak Big Ten East last year.
Yeah, I think that people are just excited that Indiana might be competitive, and they're taking off a little bit too much on Indiana. I completely agree. I think they're a good top 30 to 40 football team in the country. That's what they are.
I agree. Like when your buddy SG1 Sports predicted he predicted Indiana to upset Ohio State in his Ohio State football prediction video. I was like, really? I mean, and I like SG1 Sports. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, I'm not seeing 9-10 wins. I'm seeing probably 6-7 wins. They'll beat Michigan State and Rutgers. They'll probably lose to everybody else in the Big Ten East, and then they'll probably, depending on who they get in the West, they'll beat Purdue. I'll say that right now. They'll probably beat Purdue. But after that, I don't know who else to get in the West.
Yeah. I think Indiana's going to come back down to earth to a certain extent. I think they've got a really good team. I'm more in the 7. And I'm more in the 8-4 range. I'd have to look at the schedule, and of course, I'll make my prediction when the time comes. But let's also keep in mind, when you stick your neck out and make upset predictions during the off season, that I made one a couple of years ago in 2017 and said Pitt was going to beat Miami, and Miami showed up at that game 10-0, and obviously, tons of Miami fans told me I was an idiot, and you're going to miss on some of those and you're going to look bad, but there are going to be a handful of upsets every week in college football. And so some of them are going to sound ridiculous during the off season, but they're going to happen.
I remember one, I think it was 2019. It was Purdue and Nevada. Nevada was like a 12-point underdog. But the game was in Nevada, and I said Nevada was going to beat Purdue week 1, and I was nervous around halftime or in the third quarter because it looked like Purdue was going to be blowing out Nevada, but Nevada came back and hit that last-second 57-yard field goal.
Yeah, that was a great game, week 1 game. Absolutely. Purdue had a chance to. Yeah, Purdue was up a couple of scores, had a chance to put them away. Rondell Moore, of course, was on that team, and I think the current, that was 20. Yeah, you said 2019. So Carson Strong, who's the current Nevada quarterback, was the quarterback for that game, and he is a really good player.
I think Nevada's the favorites to get out of the West Division. I think they're even more favored than San Jose State out there in the Mountain West. So I like watching Mountain West football. I know in Pac-12 and all that. I mean, I'll stay up 2, 3 a.m. in the morning for that. So,
well, I'm right there with you.
but yeah, I just had to come on here and defend Mike Locksley a little bit, really, because I really think he's going to be moving up in those coaching rankings. I think Maryland. I think outside of Ohio State, I think Maryland's capable of being everybody in the Big Ten. Because I personally don't. I think it's Ohio State and everybody else in the Big Ten.
Okay. Maybe I'll come out with my coaches' rankings 1 through 130 or 1 through 65 in the Power 5, and maybe I'll vault Mike Locksley all the way up to number 63 or something in the country.
Especially Shane Beamer's like the last person on everybody's coaching rankings. I think he's going to do some great things down there.
Well, here's the thing, McD.
So.
Actually, you're not going to like my rankings if I would come out with those kind of coaches' rankings. And I did rank all the coaches in all the various conferences, but I just didn't put them all together. That I give any coach who has yet to coach a game, Shane Beamer being one, he's never been a head coach, I give them a neutral ranking, meaning that everybody above them is, I consider to be a success, and everybody below them to be failing. So I would actually rank Shane Beamer above Mike Locksley. And Mike Locksley, I don't know, he might be last on my Power 5 list.
Oh, if that happens, Mark,
who am I going to rank under him? Who am I going to rank under him?
I would say Scott Foster at Nebraska. Not Scott Foster, Scott Frost as an NBA ref. I look at, I'm talking like in the Big Ten. I would say him. I think Mel Tucker would be under him after this year.
I'm not talking about after this year. Mel Tucker's coached 2 seasons. And he went 5-7 in Colorado, which is about what you would expect a Colorado coach to do. And then he went to Michigan State. They only played 7 games last year. He beat Northwestern and Michigan.
I think I'm trying to think of a name you would put. I get like Mike Locksley should be on the bottom of the barrel, but at the same time, I'm seeing improvement. I think Locksley is having his team gear in the right direction. And here, I have a name for you. You should put under Mike Locksley. Dave Doran.
Dave Doran.
I'll take Locksley over Doran.
Gone to bowl games and been fairly successful at NC State. I don't know. It's like my approach to the top 25 that actually makes sense. You got to actually prove it on the field. And Mike Locksley has done nothing, 0 so far. Everybody you've mentioned has, everybody you've mentioned, Scott Frost, Mel Tucker, especially Frost, and then Dave Doran, they've succeeded. They've done something positive as a head coach. Mike Locksley has done nothing positive. There's been nothing that he's accomplished as a head coach. Nothing.
I disagree with that.
What is he?
I think he's accomplished more than he.
He hasn't accomplished anything.
He was 20-point underdog against Minnesota and a 28-point dog against Penn State. Beat them.
Well, yeah, he won football. Every coach in America that's coached a game has won at least one game. Everybody we're talking about has at least won a football game. I'm not talking about winning a game. I'm talking about accomplishing something. Scott Frost led an undefeated football team at UCF that was 0-12 2 years earlier.
He had Maryland ranked in his first season after week 2.
They didn't end the season though after week 2. They actually played the rest of the games, and he showed himself to be incompetent for the rest of the games. Mike Locksley has to accomplish something. Yeah, I think just for you, I may be doing coaches rankings 1 through 65.
I can't wait to then. After the season, Mark, I think you're going to have some respect for Mike Locksley.
I'm just saying that if you compare Mike Locksley's track record to every other coach in the Power Five, he's had the worst track record of anyone. And if he goes 7-5 this year, I will tip my cap and say, you pretty much did what an average football coach should do with that roster. You should go 4-5 in the Big Ten and win your non-conference games and go roughly 6-6, 7-5. With that roster, that's what he should be able to do. I
think he's going to do that.
Okay. And then I'll say you turned in a season that was an average football season. That will be his great accomplishment, that he's a near average football coach. If he does that.
I mean, I'm just saying, Mike Locksley has won. He does have a win against a top 25 team at Maryland. He's beaten two teams when he was 20 point plus underdogs. And he's shown progress. Minnesota blew out Maryland 52-14. He beat them. He went to Happy Valley after they got blown out 59-0. He didn't just beat Penn State. He blew out Penn State 35-14.
What's his top 25 win?
I'm telling you, I'm just seeing progress from Mike Locksley.
Where's his top 25 win? You just said he beat a top 25 team?
Syracuse. Yeah, he beat Syracuse in week 2.
Oh, the Syracuse team that finished 3-9? They were a top 25 team? They were a top 25 team at kickoff.
They were top 25 in the board that week.
They clearly showed that they were not a top 25 team.
Well, obviously, but I mean, that does go down to the top 25 win in the record books.
Pitt
does.
Pitt was preseason number 3 in 1984, and they finished 3-7-1. Were they the third best team in the country? They were the number 3 team in the country.
Obviously not.
They were a 3-7-1 team. Just like Syracuse was a 3 or 4 win football team. They weren't a top 25 team.
I agree with you. I'm just saying it goes in the record books as a top 25 win.
Yeah, it shouldn't. All right, McD. We've put everyone to sleep with a lot of Mike Locksley conversation here. I'll talk about Mike Locksley anytime you want to.
I know. I like the conversation. Thanks for taking my call. Go Terps.
All right. Appreciate it, McD. The Rod Farva is correcting me on Syracuse. When I spit out 3 wins, I thought it was going to be 4-8. I was going to correct myself at 4-8, but apparently Syracuse went 5-7 in 2019. Did they really? They were coming off 10-3. That's why they got the preseason top 25 ranking, because they put up a smoke and mirrors 10-3. That was one of the worst 10-3 football teams you will ever see, that Syracuse 2018 team. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's DeAndre. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going on tonight?
Well, I heard an interesting, R.J. Young had an interesting conversation, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. He said the reason why Nebraska fell off is because they stopped accepting top 48 players, players that were partial qualifiers. The Big 12 limited the amount they could take. They took a vote, and they limited the amount they could take. I want to know if he thought that was true or not.
So when he says Nebraska falling off, is he talking about when they fell off from a national championship standard in the early 2000s, or is he talking about more recently when they've really fallen off?
Well, they were talking about from the 90s and 2001 standard.
I have heard...
well, the reason why he said that...
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, the reason why he said that, he broke down, I can't remember the article, and I'm going to go back and listen to it, because it was something interesting in it that I wanted to cover with you. But he said that like 48%, 48 of the 85 players was partial qualifiers. And like Nebraska had like 101 people on the team because of their walk-on status and stuff. So he was just bringing that up. But he said 48 of the 85 players was partial qualified. All right, that whole starting defensive line for partial qualifiers, and it was one of the best defenses at that time that beat down Florida.
Well,
So
there was a
opinion
scholarship
on that.
reduction from 105 to 85. I don't remember when that was.
Mhm.
But the
Well,
scholarships.
he said those 101 came from the walk-ons because Nebraska tuition was so cheap that you could have a lot of walk-ons, and that's what they did. I don't know how they got. I don't know all the loopholes and stuff, but my main question is about the partial qualifiers for you. Is that the reason why you think Nebraska fell off?
I really couldn't tell you.
Hello?
I'd have to go back. I know that I've heard that discussed, and I've heard that that altered certain programs like Nebraska, and of course they had a huge walk-on program that they relied heavily on. Their strength and conditioning. I got to think that this had more to do with it than anything. So weight training in football, even in major college football in the 70s, was fairly sporadic. And
Right.
even into the 80s, you know, they had, I remember when
Right.
I played high school football in 1984, 85, 86, in that range, yeah, they would show us the weight room and say, you guys just jump in there and throw some weights up, and we would just mess around. And you know, they didn't keep track of how much we lifted and what the regiment was. It was just, here's the weight room and go to it. So obviously it was much more stringent at a place that played that level of college football. But Nebraska was the first. They took way off on strength and conditioning, way ahead of their rivals and way across ahead of anybody across the nation. And so when everybody caught up in terms of strength and conditioning, I would think that that had a major impact on Nebraska. Used to just bully teams. They were just so strong and had a number of players that had wrestling backgrounds that they would recruit along the offensive and defensive lines. That the other thing I can't speak to, I know that thinking back through discussions and things that I've read, that yeah, that would have a factor in, because you can pull in a lot lesser academically successful student athletes that way. If you bring in all those partial qualifiers, yeah, seems to make sense.
Okay. So another point, and this RJ Young didn't talk about this, but was Kansas State the first school to build, like when Clemson built the mega facility? Were they the first school to do that? I heard that somewhere, like Kansas State was the first one to do that, and then Iowa was the first one to offer big contracts. Like with what's the guy? There was a coach that was there. He was linked to the Patriots for a long time. I guess he was under Belichick or Parcells somewhere, and he tried to go to the NFL, and Iowa paid him a whole bunch of money. I can't think of his name.
So see, I missed the beginning of that. Who did you say? Did you say Penn State?
No, Kent. Kansas State. I'm sorry, Kansas State. Kansas State was the first one.
Kansas State.
To build those big old facilities. Yeah, like Clemson did. Like on that level, like what you saw, big facilities popping up. Was that true? Was that part of the Kansas State turnaround back in the 90s?
I don't remember anything specifically about Kansas State's facilities being better than anyone's. I don't remember.
Okay, I gotta. When we get off the phone, I'm gonna tweet it to you and show you what I'm talking about. Then maybe you can make the connection to it by tweeting back. But yeah, that's about it, Mark. You know, man, I saw the Clemson. I know we talked about this before. Clemson still a 3-point favorite over dang, I can't think of it, Georgia. That's about the only thing. I've been trying to tell us about. I went back and looked at that Notre Dame game with DJ Ugule and Clemson versus Notre Dame. Clemson had a 33-26 lead with like 2 minutes to go. Clemson defense is really what let them down in that game outside of that crazy fumble by ETN. I wonder, because Notre Dame defense was highly regarded last year, and I know, I don't know how good is the talent that they played against, because they essentially played against the same team. But I'm kind of wondering, are we underlooking how good DJ Ugule is? I know he was tied with Bryce Young for being one of the top quarterbacks, but it really comes to defense that let them down in that game. I'm really wondering how good DJ really is compared to Trevor. Because if you go look at DJ's numbers for 2 games, he almost threw for 1,000 yards with those 2 games. And I ain't trying to be funny, but Cornell and it took a long time to be the receiver that we saw last year. I mean, he was a top recruit, but think about it, he was like a 5-year senior. I mean, he was there for a minute before he got really good like he was last year. I mean, he really didn't get no run in the past, and he was ahead of Higgins and Ralston, and he came in before them. And last year, he just exploded on the scene. So I'm trying to wonder, are we underlooking how good DJ really is compared to Trevor Lawrence? I know people are going to say, well, he's not the runner that Trevor Lawrence was, but we didn't see him run the ball because he would have got hurt, who would have came in and replaced him. And then also, he was already hurt from that Georgia Tech game when they used to run the read option with him. So I'm kind of wondering, are we underlooking how good DJ really might be next year? And you got your full, if your receivers are healthy and they live up to the potential, we already seen what Ross can do. But if Nagata and Latson shows up, I mean, think how good the offense got to be next year. And I know everybody, I'm sure everybody's concerned that the Clemson fan like I am. I'm kind of wondering about the middle of that offensive line and can they get a push and stuff like that. That's my biggest concern about Clemson right there, is the offensive line.
I don't think I'm underestimating. I don't believe I'm underestimating Uiagalelei. I ranked him the second best quarterback in the conference, and I certainly said a million times after the Notre Dame game that I didn't pin him. You know, the only thing that comes to mind that I remember he did in a crucial spot in that game, and you know, you see, I think we pick apart these players a little bit too much. They're not perfect. They're playing under stressful conditions. Is that he didn't throw the ball away in overtime, and he took a sack that really hurt them. But other than that, he played a great game, and he's just a huge dude, 6'4", 250, and has a cannon. And I give him a whole lot of credit for what he did against Boston College. I remember that, of course, was his first start, and I was watching some other game, and suddenly I see Boston College is up 28-6, and my thought is, well, Uiagalelei's playing a crappy game. He must be screwing up for them to be down 22 points to BC. But I looked at the numbers and saw that he was playing well, flipped the game on, and watched the comeback. And so for all that to be placed on his shoulders as Trevor Lawrence's replacement, down 22 points against a decent team, and to bring them back to win. I know the defense helped him out with a couple big plays, but still, to bring them back, I thought that showed a lot. I'm not underestimating him. I think he's going to be one of the 5 or 10 best quarterbacks in the country.
Right. Well, like I said, not you, but I just think everybody like I saw a post that said, you know how Alabama has 3 starting quarterbacks in the NFL coming up this year. Yeah, but I don't know how much you follow the NFL, but Miami's really not that happy with Tua. Jalen Hurts, I don't know how long he's gonna last. And who's the third quarterback for him? For Alabama right now.
Who's in the quarterback room right now?
Yeah, Matt Jones. And he's not. And you hear, you don't get to see these guys play yet, but he's not really looking to get a Patriots camp from the report, but he is a rookie though. I mean, we don't know what he's going to develop into once Bill Belichick and Josh Daniels get a hold of him, like fully. But like Clemson has a chance to have. Deshaun Watson should have went ahead of the
Mitch Trubisky.
That was like the
sure.
Yeah, Trubisky. That was the biggest mistake I ever seen. But make a long story short, Clemson has a chance to have 3 great quarterbacks to play in the NFL, especially if Deshaun Watson gets out of trouble when they're young, and that's going to represent my. I remember when Tua was at Alabama. Man, look at this dude. Look how he throws. Now they get him in the NFL. Like, man, this dude, I don't know. Was it smoke and mirrors? And then you got to say the same thing about Matt Jones. Was it smoke and mirrors? Or was it your receivers or was it you? And sometimes, I hate to say this, and I know Clemson fans going to get mad at me. I question Trevor Lawrence because he had been hyped up so much. But if you go back and compare him to Deshaun Watson, even Todd Ford, he never did a type of yardage that they did, even compared to DJ. Because if you go look at Clemson top 10 passing games, they come from Deshaun Watson, DJ, and Todd Ford. There's none with Trevor Lawrence. Everybody said, well, he won a national championship. That defense was a big reason why he won a national championship. And that might be the biggest reason why they won that national championship. And I'm not saying Trevor wasn't great. I mean, but Ross made some great catches too over another freshman, Patrick Surtain. So, I mean, Ross did really good. I mean, I'm just saying that, sometimes we got to look at who it is and why they might be rooting for. I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence was a bad quarterback. He was great and stuff like that. But, I'm just saying that we might have to look at DJ and saying that he might be the first round pick when he comes out in 2 years, too, just like we giving Trevor Lawrence all the type over the last 2 or 3 years that he's been at Clemson. I'll go to bring up an any question, and I'm going to let you go. If Kelly Bryant would have finished out the year, would Clemson have won the national championship? Because obviously Notre Dame wasn't going to score against Clemson. And what was Alabama going to do? I mean, they was having trouble with Clemson defense too. Later on in the second half. So we had Clemson still won the national championship. That Kelly Bryant had to be there because if you look at a game that Clemson lost Kelly Bryant sophomore year, he didn't play, and we played with a backup quarterback, a backup kicker, and we lost the game, 26-27 because the kicker missed the field goal. I mean, I'm just asking, would we have still won the national championship if Kelly Bryant had still been a quarterback? Because if you go back and look at that Alabama game, that was him as a sophomore. He turned over the ball a lot in that game. It really wasn't Alabama's offense. It was Alabama's defense that made the difference. And I know people say, well, that's because Kelly Bryant couldn't throw the ball.
I get your point.
I'm
that Clemson won the semifinal game by 27 points over Notre Dame. They only gave up 3 points, so pretty much any quarterback could have won that game. But obviously what the offense does affects the defense, and the defense affects the offense. And yes, I'm not saying that Notre Dame would have beaten Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, but Trevor Lawrence, he carved up. Kelly Bryant never had passing performances like Trevor Lawrence. And Kelly Bryant's actually a guy that once I saw him play against Louisville, the first time that they really let him cut loose a little bit was early in that 2017 season. They were playing a pretty good Louisville team. Yeah, that would have been a Lamar Jackson. Was he still with them? Yeah, that would have still been Lamar Jackson when they played him at Louisville. It was like a Saturday night game. And I thought Kelly Bryant looked good. I thought, okay, this guy can pass the ball better than I'm hearing. But over time, he didn't. And I just don't think you can compare Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant in any such way. Kelly Bryant couldn't get back on the field, even at Missouri. And Trevor Lawrence, Kelly Bryant isn't making the throws that Lawrence made against Notre Dame. Do they still win the game? Yeah, I think we're pretty certain it was a 30-3 game. But it would have been a different game.
Let me ask you this, Mark.
And then, no, I'm taking Alabama against Kelly Bryant's Clemson team in 2018 in the championship game. Because, again, 44-16, I know they ran over them, but that game and those two teams were much closer than that.
Oh, yeah, I give it that. They played again, it would be closer. As a matter of fact, I probably think Alabama would have won the game. But let me ask you this, Mark. Would Clemson have beat Texas A&M without Kelly Bryant?
Yeah, true. They played a really close game, a 2-point conversion, 28-26 game, and Bryant played a really good game. And Kellen Mond played a really good game, by the way, in the second half, threw for 400 yards. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence wasn't quite up to his you got to cut him a bit of a break. It was really early in his career at that point.
I'll give it to you, but that LSU game and that is still fresh in my mind. I mean, don't get me wrong. He took a hell of a hit against Ohio State. He came out like a beast and led Clemson back. But there's some of his performances on the big stage to me. I just wouldn't see Deshaun Watson going out like that, and I just really think Deshaun Watson got dumped on in the draft. I mean, I ain't talking about his behavior now. I'm talking about what happened in the draft. I really think that what happened to him, and he should have been the first quarterback taken during that thing. So that's why I probably look for holes with Trevor Lawrence, because I felt like Deshaun Watson really got dumped on. That's not Trevor Lawrence's fault, but
I said the same thing at the time about Deshaun Watson when he came out. I said, I'm no passing guru. I'm not a quarterback coach. And I know that all these things are stated about how the ball comes out of their hands and if they drop their elbow too much and all this other business. But all I know is Deshaun Watson's a tremendous athlete. And in 2 consecutive championship games, in one, he put up almost 500 yards of total offense for a team that was not comparable to Alabama, and he almost pulled out a win. And then and maybe without the onside kick plus the kickoff return by Kenyon Drake, maybe he wins that game. And then the second one, he's getting his brains beat out in the first quarter. They're down 14-0. The pass rush was all over him. He bounces back from them and leads 2 game-winning drives in the fourth quarter against the best defense in the country. And the throws were on the money. Sure, his receivers did make plays for him. Mike Williams, Ardavis Scott, Williams in particular, made plays for him the last 2 drives of the game. But I just thought, how does this guy not get drafted higher than that? I said the same thing.
Yeah, even Mahomes, and don't get me wrong, I know that Mahomes is a great quarterback, and I know everybody say Hall of Fame Holmes already was joke, but Holmes sat for a whole year. Deshaun Watson came in right in the play with the Texans, and I know the Texans had DeAndre Hopkins, and I can't remember who the other receiver was at the time, but I mean,
Notre Dame.
I just don't think he get I just personally just don't think Deshaun Watson get enough credit. Not saying he don't get credit, but the hype that came in with Trevor Lawrence compared to what Deshaun Watson did is like, what is his name? He does. I talked to a Clemson guy who went to Jack Britt. He was moved from tight end to receiver, tight end to offensive line. So that first year, I think Todd Boyd beat Georgia. So the next year, that game with Clemson and Georgia was close until I think it was Chubb that ran a touchdown on a kickoff back for a touchdown. And I asked him, it was E.J. McCarron, I can't remember his name. But anyway, he said if Deshaun Watson would have played the whole game and the coaches knew it, that they would have beat Georgia that year. Yeah, in their opinion, because the quarterback at that time couldn't throw the ball. So I to me, Deshaun been disrespected his whole starting career. I mean, I'm just saying. So when Clemson started moving the ball against Georgia, I think that Georgia team had a pretty good defense. It was when Deshaun Watson came in the game. Then they took him out and put the other kid in. And then Clemson lost the game with, I think, 45-24 or something like that.
Yep.
I can't remember the exact score. But hey, man.
Well, I'm the guy that posted a video saying that Deshaun Watson should have won the Heisman Trophy instead of Lamar Jackson. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Both of them had that showdown was legendary between Louisville and Clemson. And I know everybody said, well, the guy would have turned the ball up the field, they would have won the game. Probably so, but, what can you say? But Mark, you have a great night, man. I keep listening to the show.
Thanks, DeAndre. Appreciate it.
All
right, we'll get to our comment from Chuck C here that I've been waiting to get to. Appreciate that so much, Chuck C. Thank you for the Super Chat contribution. I will remind everyone that you can contribute right here via the Super Chat, or just go to Venmo, PayPal, or Cash App, search Mark Rogers TV, and you bypass the YouTube filter. So Chuck C. Mark, what will keep boosters from targeting specific players with the new NIL rules? What will keep boosters from targeting specific players? Well, the players, as long as everything's above board, I was having this conversation right on here the other night with whomever was the caller, and basically saying there are so many unknowns about how this is going to play out, because on one hand, I could expect that there are going to be some unsavory type booster agent types that are going to take advantage of this. In what ways, I don't necessarily know at this point, but I could see this as being a positive in keeping everything above board. And why cheat anymore? Because you can just go ahead and earn money above board, and you are a free enterprise, a capitalist, to earn money, and it's all done above the table. So I guess we would have to have a further discussion for me to understand exactly what the boosters would be doing in targeting specific players with that, with the new conditions, because the conditions are allowing the players to benefit from our capitalist society, basically. So maybe I'm missing something there. I probably don't have enough of a devious mind or underhanded mind, or I'm just not smart enough to be a criminal, is my problem. So about the, wow, got extra tickets for Alabama, Miami. Get to Atlanta, and one or two have your name on them. My son for Bama, me for Miami. Wow, what an offer there from Chuck C. Thank you so much, Chuck C. So 2 seasons ago, for 2019, my son and I went down to the Miami, Florida game. What made that unique was it was a week 0 game. And it was the only game that really mattered, a big-time game for that weekend. Unfortunately, this is week 1. So I'm kind of tied to this chair understand how I make money here and how we build out this channel. And the only way it survives is for me to cover everything. So if I spend a ton of money, go to Miami at the Miami-Alabama game in Atlanta, and that's the only game I focus on, I'm going to make like $13 and I'm going to spend about $1,000. And instead of being here, spending zero and earning hopefully some money from all the broadcasts and all the content that I produce. So unfortunately, I'm a one-man band, and traveling to games obviously costs a lot of money, but it also eliminates my ability to earn money covering all the games and talking to all of you about all the games. So for all the nice people that have offered and said, hey, come down to a game, it kind of ruins the product. It kind of ruins the channel. That's unfortunate. But Chuck C., thank you so much for that. And if there's any way that I can figure out how to make that work so that it would be viable, maybe in future years when I've got a bunch of backups, I've got a bunch of backup hosts, that would be phenomenal. But Chuck C., you're always here for us. I appreciate you being here. And thank you for the contribution. And one more time, I'll remind everyone, Amazon link, help us grow the channel. voiceofcollegefootball.com, check it out. And right now, it's just a bunch of links to our platforms on YouTube. But please get accustomed to going to voiceofcollegefootball.com. We may truly need it someday. If you follow me, things happen on YouTube from time to time. And also, we led off this show with the title, the topic being the top 10 arguments in college football history. So I've yet to get to those. So let's look at these. Again, these are courtesy College Football 150, celebrating 150 years of college football in 2019. So these are arguments that I should probably delve into and post videos, maybe on all these, because they all interest me for sure, and many more. Number 10, out of the top 10 greatest arguments in college football history, number 10 is the year 1973, in which Michigan was robbed of going to the Rose Bowl by the Big Ten Conference. I will explain this quickly for those who aren't aware of what happened that particular year. So at that time, only one Big Ten team went to a bowl game, and they went to the Rose Bowl. The conference champion went to the Rose Bowl. Everybody else sat home. It didn't matter if you were 9-0-1, what your record was. You did not go to a bowl game. The champion went to the Rose Bowl, and the champion only. There was another rule that previous to that you could not go to the Rose Bowl in consecutive years. So even if you won the Big Ten a second consecutive year, the second place team would go to the Rose Bowl. So they finally did away with that idiotic rule. You talk about participation trophies. So they finally got rid of that. And what happened in this particular season is that Ohio State and Michigan were undefeated, and they tied. It was a game played in which Ohio State dominated the first half. Michigan outplayed Ohio State in the second half. And Michigan missed a number of field goals that would have won the game, and it finished a 10-10 tie. So they finished tied on the field and for the Big Ten championship. So the Big Ten voted who would go to the Rose Bowl. Ohio State had gone to the Rose Bowl the previous season. Many believe that a number of Big Ten members voted for Ohio State and against Michigan because the Michigan starting quarterback was hurt late in the game, and he hurt his shoulder, and it was unknown whether he would be ready to go on January 1st. So the thought was, for the good of the Big Ten, let's send the team that is healthier, even though Michigan outplayed Ohio State during the second half of the game and felt as though they got robbed out of a Rose Bowl appearance. And Bo Schembechler, to the day he died, just could not let this go. But Ohio State went on and beat USC by 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. But the Big Ten voted 5-4-1, or there would be, let me separate that, 10, must have been 4-3-1 It was a 1-vote difference in Ohio State's favor with 1 abstention. All right. I could go on that forever. There's a documentary on the Big Ten Network that's really good concerning that, and it's probably online. You could find it. Argument number 9 is, should Richard Nixon have awarded Texas the 1969 national championship? So Richard Nixon, big college football fan, attended the Texas-Arkansas game in 1969, 1-2. And once Texas won the game 15-14, Richard Nixon, this is meaningless because Richard Nixon could not have awarded the national championship, but he did, in quotes, award the national championship to Texas before the bowl games were played. And then Texas confirmed the number 1 ranking in winning the Cotton Bowl over Notre Dame and won the national championship. So I don't really understand the significance of that in particular because it was not relevant. It was a guy with a lot of power in other areas, of course, running the free world, but had nothing to do with college football, just making a stupid statement and people getting upset about that. All right. Top 10 arguments of all time in college football. Number 8, should UCF have claimed a 2017 national championship? And I will say, yes, they should. Not that they were the national champion or the best team, but they had every right being robbed of an opportunity to play for a national championship. I say that any team in the history of college football that won all of its games should hoist would be the word, hoist a banner. I would do it if I was Auburn. I would put up a banner, 2003 national champion, 2004 national champions. If I was Penn State, 1969, 1973, undefeated, did everything we possibly could, went to major bowl games, won every game. We're the national champions just as much as the team that got voted the national champions. Put the banner up. Throw a parade. I said that even before Danny White, the UCF athletic director at the time, came out and said, we're going to throw a parade, put up a banner. I said that right after the game. If I was at UCF, I'm throwing a parade. I'm declaring ourselves national champions. I'm throwing this in the face of the College Football Playoff Committee to say, screw you. You don't give us an opportunity. We'll declare ourselves the national champions. That's all we could do. We actually beat the team that beat the 2 number 1 teams that played for the national championship. We beat Auburn. Auburn beat Georgia and Alabama, ironically, on the same field that we beat Auburn. So, yes, I'm going to throw up a national championship banner. All right, number 7. Should the BCS have rematched LSU and Alabama in 2011? No. Were those 2 football teams, LSU and Alabama, the 2 best teams in the country in 2011? Yes. That doesn't mean they should have played for the national championship. I remember walking into work after that was declared. The formula came up with LSU 1, Alabama 2. Of course, they played in the regular season. LSU won a thrilling 9-6 overtime game. And people asked me, should Alabama and LSU be playing in the national championship game? And I said, nope. Then the following question was, oh, you don't think they're the 2 best teams in the country? And I said, no, I do believe that they are the 2 best teams in the country. They are the 2 best teams in the country. That doesn't mean that they should be playing for a national championship. The college football universe that season decided to exclude the rest of college football and just focus on the SEC. And basically the SEC played a double championship. So the first one was negated by the second one. But Oklahoma State won a conference title with the same record as Alabama. So they should have been playing in the national championship game. Number 6. Did Notre Dame deserve the 1966 national championship after turtling, not familiar with that term, versus Michigan State? Basically, Notre Dame and Michigan State played a 1-2 game at Notre Dame in 1966. Tremendous game. Old school, rock'em sock'em running game. defensive battle, 10-10 game, and Notre Dame had opportunities to try to win the game. And they just, Ara Parsegan just decided, we're just going to run the ball into the line, run out the clock, game over. Didn't try to win the game. And the final score was 10-10. Notre Dame went on to go undefeated, and they were voted the national champion. Well, did they deserve the 66 championship? Yes and no. Yes, in that they had the best record, tied with Michigan State, but they did not deserve it any more than Michigan State. If anything, Michigan State tied Notre Dame at Notre Dame. I would have to review the entire season to make sure that there's something that I'm not missing, but they were there. There should be a tie for it. Should have been a split national championship. They tied, and they had the same record. Michigan State and Notre Dame should be. And if I was Michigan State, I'd hoist a banner in the stadium and declare the 1966 national championship. All right, number 5. Did BYU deserve? I love this word, deserve. Did BYU deserve its 1984 national championship? BYU did all that it could do in winning a national championship. They could not help that their schedule was rubbish, and they played a 6-5 Michigan team in the Holiday Bowl and won by 1 touchdown. BYU was probably, I'll say it that way. I will say LSU and Alabama in 2011 were the 2 best teams in the country, but I will state that BYU was probably not the best team in the country in 1984, but there was no other team that even finished with, well, let's see. Yeah. Washington could have finished 11-1 with a bowl win, Orange Bowl win over Oklahoma, but they lost by no. Check that. Oklahoma was 9-1-1. Most people considered Oklahoma to be the best team and most likely would have vaulted past BYU with an Orange Bowl win over Washington. Washington won the Orange Bowl that year over Oklahoma 28-17. Jacques Robinson, if I recall, and Washington in that bowl game over. So you didn't have a viable winner that year that played in a major conference with a major conference schedule. Check out my video, 1984. You want to hear the complete answer to that question, check out my video, look it up. National Championship 1984, disputed national championship 1984. I produced videos on 1983, 84, 90, 91, 96, and 2000. And I love doing those videos, but not enough people watch them. Number 4, should Charles Woodson have won the Heisman Trophy over Peyton Manning? Yes. I had no issue with that Heisman Trophy. Charles Woodson could not accumulate statistics playing cornerback in the Big Ten. Peyton Manning was the favorite to win the Heisman. He had an excellent season. His team was not a national championship contention. They lost to Florida that year. They did play in a major bowl game, 1997. 1997, they played Nebraska. And maybe they did have a shot at the national championship at that point because they got blown out by Nebraska in the Fiesta Bowl that year. But Charles Woodson was phenomenal and really made the plays against Ohio State that won the game that sent Michigan to the Rose Bowl undefeated. He had an interception in the end zone in that game, had a punt return for a touchdown in that game, and he had a big pass reception on a touchdown drive against Ohio State in a 1-4 matchup. All right, number 3 was the Bush push. Bush, meaning should that have been allowed? Was that? So we're going back to 2005, Notre Dame hosting USC in a huge matchup of 1 versus, I'm seeing 9 here. Great back and forth game. Brady Quinn versus Matt Leinart. And USC was a pretty substantial favorite, went on to, of course, win the national championship that year. lose to Texas. They were defending a national championship. They made it all the way back and were a favorite, of course, to win the national championship, but lost to Texas at the end of the game. So Reggie Bush on a goal line play to win the game, Reggie Bush kind of pushed, which was illegal at the time, is no longer illegal, pushed Matt Leinart. It's controversial as whether he did or not, but it looks, according to the tape, as though Reggie Bush pushed Matt Leinart into the end zone and pushed the pile for the game-winning score. I don't see an issue with that. It's football. It's a play that was changed later, so it further legitimizes the play. I don't have a huge issue with that particular play. All right, at number 2, here we go. Should the refs have called pass interference versus Miami against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl in the 2003 national championship game? All right. Anybody go back, watch the play. Actually, the correct call in that play should have been defensive holding. The defensive back, I forget his name, the defensive back held Chris Gamble, had his jersey, held him by both arms, held him. Okay. I think the correct call would not have been pass interference. It would have been defensive holding. The result would have been exactly the same. Ohio State ran the play from like the 6-yard line, something in that range. And so it would have been a first and goal regardless of whether it was defensive pass interference or holding. Yeah, so they should have blown the whistle and thrown the flag. Yes. All right. And finally, the number one controversial debate in college football history, and this was brought up by Sooner Thrawn. Should Tom Osborne have gone for the win versus Miami? Well, it's easy to say now that no, he should not have, because it cost his team a national championship, and Tom Osborne was desperately seeking a national championship, had the best team in the country. This would have cost Miami its first national championship. So for as many Miami fans that moan and groan and bellyache about national championships, that they should have had more, they were actually gifted one to a certain extent by the decision by Tom Osborne in 1983, because that Miami team lost by 25 points to Florida that year. And even with winning over Nebraska, you could make an argument, as I did in my video 1983, look it up, that maybe Auburn, with the schedule that the Auburn Tigers played and going 11-1, should have won the national championship. But should have Osborne gone for the win? Well, it's easy to say now that he should not have, but in the time frame and in the split of the moment, in the spur of the moment, he wanted to win an outright national championship with no criticism, no doubt, no questions asked. We won it. We won the football game on the field against Miami. Good questions there. And there were a ton of questions that you guys posed in the live chat that I found very interesting as well. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, everyone. We have been on here a long, long time tonight, so I appreciate everybody being here. Tomorrow is Thursday. We've got 2 Miami shows, 1 and 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think that's it. And a bunch of records that I'm doing. I'm going to be doing roster breakdowns, so please join me for roster breakdowns as I deliver those. I also wanted to ask you guys, I wanted to start up a fantasy football league, college football fantasy league for this fall, and a pick'em league with our predictions and give away prizes. And so I want any suggestions on the best way to go about that. So if anybody would like to help, or if anybody would like to offer suggestions on what sites would be the best one to utilize for a college football fantasy football league and for a pick'em league, please let me know. You can hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Again, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV to contribute right here. Use that Amazon link, and we will see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Miami channel for our Hurricanes live show.